listening to AchtungMillwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Birmingham. Accept no substitute.
Hello dear listeners, welcome to AchtungMillwall. My name is Nick Hart. Welcome to one of my random fixtures from the past shows. As you can probably tell from my voice, I am in the throes of the latter stages of COVID-19. I think I'm released back into society after Wednesday, so from Thursday onwards, which kind of knocks out my trip to Millwall tonight. So I'm bored, and what do I do when I'm bored? I decide to get on the old number generator and see what random year from the past we can look at from the perspective of Millwall Football Club. And today's year is 1926, so I've gone back to February the 15th, 1926, in the roaring 20s. And the nearest fixture that I found to that particular date was a good one, actually. Charlton Athletic 1, Millwall 4, an away win at the Valley, played in front of 22,000 on February the 13th, 1926, in the old Division 3 South. I do have a newspaper report for that fine away win for the Lions at the Valley, and this one is from a newspaper, the Westminster Gazette, local newspaper, but I think a lot of the local newspapers back then seemed to often take, wider stories than just their own parochial area. So this is from the Westminster Gazette, dated the 15th of Feb 1926. The headline is Millwall's Strength, a fine half-back line. Charlton outplayed. Charlton Athletic 1, Millwall 4. Mill defeated Charlton at the Valley by 4-1. They thoroughly deserved their victory. Their third away win in league games this season, showing far more skill and understanding in attack and being much steadier under pressure. Their great strength lay in the half-back line. This would be the old football tactics for younger listeners. Half-backs were, I suppose, equivalent to midfield, really, in modern parlance, where Graham, Bryant and Amos acquitted themselves admirably, it says. Parker, the centre-forward, was closely marked by Armitage of Charlton, but he led the Mill attack with dash and spirit and received excellent support, especially from Mühl and Chance, on the right wing. The best of the Charlton defenders was Patterson, who tackled with judgment and gave his forwards many excellent passes. Charlton started rather unsteadily, and in consequence Millwall had matters much their own way for some time. Charlton settled down, however, and set up some heavy attacks. In half an hour, Chance made a perfect opening for Müller to score for Millwall, and a free kick by Gore was headed in by Müller 10 minutes afterwards. So I'm going to guess that's about 30 minutes and 40 minutes, Mill 2-0 up. After the interval, Charlton were much overplayed. Within 5 minutes, Gore put on Mill's third goal, and though Rankin got through for Charlton, Müller had another goal before the finish. So a little bit vague in its reporting there, but you get the picture. 2-0 at half time, and the Lions pressed on to take the 2 points. Nearly said 3 points there, listeners. 2 points back in these far off days in Division 3 South. For a good win at the Valley. Millwall would finish this particular season, Division 3 South, in third position. Not a bad finish, really, when you weigh it up. This would be under the management of the legendary figure of Bob Hunter, who we've mentioned a few times, and to whom I've placed the order for a plaque to go on the kind of wall area of the den in his memory, because he's one of our great managers. And this is a good example of a typical Bob Hunter season. Mid-20s, we were building to a team that would eventually lift the 3rd Division South Championship in 1927-28. Bear in mind as well that back then, to be promoted out of the 3rd tier, you had to be champions. Only the champions got promoted. The bottom two would seek re-election. One of those two teams would be Charlton, our opponents in this particular game. But the Lions would finish 3rd, so no reward for what was a pretty good season in 1925-26. Just picked out one or two names from the team here. I'll run through the whole team because I think it's worth it. Joe Lansdale in goal. The two fullbacks were Horace Tilling. I searched because it's written as Telling on the Millwall history website, and I couldn't find telling in Neil's Who's Who of Millwall players, and I thought that's not like Neil and Richard Lindsay and Dave Sullivan and all the others to be lax and miss a player. And the reason is that it was misspelled, so it's actually Tilling, Horace Tilling, and Richard Hill in full-back position. The midfield mentioned by the newspaper, Alf Amos, Bill Bryant and Len Graham. We've mentioned Bill Bryant a few times on previous shows, and I believe Len Graham as well. The two wingers mentioned in the report, Sidney Gore and George Chance, and then our front line list for this particular fixture, Alf Muller, Richard Parker, and Andrew Lincoln up front for Millwall. And I actually picked out 4 names from the Who's Who book, which is a wonderful, wonderful repository of knowledge. Do visit victorpublishing.co.uk and find yourself this book, listeners. Do yourself a favour. It's got every Millwall player that has ever pulled on the blue shirt for the Dockers and the Lions since formation in 1885. It is worth £20 of your money, believe me. But just as an example, I've picked out, first of all, Richard Hill, who played in the fullback position in this win at the Valley on the 13th of February 1926. Richard Henry Hill was one of our long-serving players. 1919 to 1930 he played for Millwall, so after the First World War, played 392 games for the Lions. He was born in Mapley in 1893 and he passed away in Coventry in 1971. His career took in some wide-ranging clubs. Boys Brigade Football, must be a local youth club where he comes from, Dakeen Street Old Boys. He was then in the Grenadier Guards during the First World War. We'll come on to the little biography that the book so wonderfully supplies. Grenadier Guards during the Great War. Then he signed for Millwall Athletic in July 1919. And after leaving us, he went on to Torquay, Newark Town, Mansfield Town as a trainer. Played for, I think he may have trained for Sutton. Coventry City became a trainer, and then Torquay and Coventry again as trainer, making his debut for Millwall certainly in a 2-2 draw against Brentford in 1922. Richard Hill, known as Dick, as the old-fashioned, got humorous overtones of course nowadays, but Dick served in the Grenadier Guards in the Great War and was spotted whilst playing in an army representative side. He was Jack Fort's long-term partner, and he was actually one of our England caps, which makes him notable. He was capped for England versus Belgium in 1926 and was a member of the famous 1928 27-28 Division 3 South title-winning side that would be promoted to the second division as champions, all-conquering side. 13 seasons at Den before finishing his career at Torquay. He was associated with Coventry after he left the game for over 35 years, working for that club until just a few weeks before his death in 1971. Richard Hill, 392 games for the Lions. So he was playing in a fullback position. I've laid out my team sheet actually in old school style, listeners. You'd love it if you could see it. 5-3-2, 2 fullbacks, 3 midfielders, and then a 5-man front line. My school, when we first started playing school football, going back to Castlecombe in Mottingham in the late 60s, early 70s, actually used to line up in that 5-3-2 traditionalist system. None of your 4-4-2s or 4-4-3s that were prevalent in the game for us at the time. No wonder we got beat a lot. I'm not claiming that as my poor performance as a footballer, because I was awful. Anyway, Richard Hill we've done. Sidney Gore playing on the wing. Sidney Percy Gore, to give him his full name, was an outside left for Millwall, playing in this particular 4-1 win over Charlton. Played for the Lions between 1923 and 2027. 129 games, scorer of 13 goals for Millwall. He was born in Faversham in Kent, 1900, passing away in Ashford, also in Kent, in 1987. His career began during the course of the First World War, actually. He was playing for Faversham Rangers in 1916. He had a trial with Gillingham in 1920, Sittingbourne, before signing with Millwall in May 1923. After playing for us, he would return to more Kent football, Chatham, Gillingham, Ashford Town. before joining their committee, actually, Ashford Town's committee in 1963. He finished as a groundsman after his career at Gore Court Cricket Club in Sittingbourne, and he was a blacksmith stocker. Wow. In the railway works at Ashford, where he worked until his death aged 86. Steam trains, listeners, younger listeners, I don't remember steam trains. I can't claim to be that old. I remember them, I've seen old black and white footage of the steam train system. But he was a blacksmith stocker, so I'm going to guess that's kind of like an assistant to a blacksmith. Skilled trade, I'd guess. Sidney Gore. We've mentioned already Alf Muller, and I think Neil Fissler in one of, quite a few of our shows has mentioned Alf. One of our better strikers, in actual fact. He was certainly top scorer for this particular season we're talking about here, 1925 to 26. He's listed as an inside forward, so not a centre forward, but one of the inside men. I suppose in modern terms you'd think of him as a kind of a number 10, this mythical number 10 role that you hear so much about. But he played 234 games, scoring 75 goals for us, so a very useful player for Millwall between 1919 and 1927. He's actually listed in his biography here as an outstanding footballer with superb control and an excellent range of passes. He appeared for the professionals versus the amateurs. You don't get fixtures like this anymore, do you? Professionals versus amateurs, which was an England trial match at Highbury in 1925, and played for the FA in a representative game. He was seen as the brains, as they put it here, the brains of the Millwall attack, and was the leading scorer in 3 of his 7 seasons, including this one we're talking about here, 1925-26. He was also a fine cricketer who, as a youngster, batted with W.G. Grace and played in the middle order for Essex County Cricket Club and Devon, one of the minor counties. By trade an engine turner, he served as a professional to Plymouth Cricket Club, coached at Falmouth, and then in later life he was coaching both football and cricket at Lancing College. He had a brother, Frank Muller, who also had a spell at Millwall. One of the things that really strikes me, listeners, about these old players is they were... we have this phrase now that we're a working class club, and that's true, I think, especially in Millwall's case, but in others too, especially ours. But these really were working class men. They had come from hard labour often before football being a means of escape from that factory or dock or rural, whatever you like. Hard work is hard work wherever you are, and they knew what it was like to work hard. Many of them of this era, particularly, had served in the forces during the Great War, and they knew what it was like for life to be hard. And I don't wish that upon anyone. And it's easy to knock modern footballers, but we all live in a very different era to the likes of Alf. And it's easy to forget how lucky we are. I think that's probably the best way that I can sum it up. His career took in West Ham, Corinthians, Catford Southend, which is a club I'll come back to, actually, strangely as it might sound. Catford Southend, Leytonstone as an amateur for Millwall. Then he played for Norwich, Watford and Margate before coaching at Lancing, a private school. And the final name I've picked out here is one that was a bit of a mystery to me. I was looking for Telling, Telling, and I couldn't find trace of him anywhere. But anyway, it turned out from searching on some of the old newspapers, his name was actually Horace Tilling, Tilling. Played 64 games for Millwall, 1922 to 28. Born in New Cross, local lad, in 1896. He died in Hemel Hempstead in 1955. He was an Army International, Horace. He said it was just like the biography of this, so I thought I'd have to include it. An Army International, Horace was said to have a kick like a mule. That I think many people from New Cross, where he hailed from, do have a kick like a mule, in my experience, listeners. He worked as an indexer, office job, I guess, indexer. He scored a penalty in his first home game against Portsmouth, but had to wait until January 1926 to dislodge Jack Fultz, one of the big names. He's on the calendar that we did last year, Jack Fultz. But despite a couple of runs in the side, the long-serving Fultz always returned, always pushed Horace Tilling out. Known as Big Ben, that was his nickname, Big Ben Tilling. Not sure why. He would leave for Northampton and after his football career was over as an engineer at the Ovaltine factory in Apsley until he died from a heart attack aged 59. He's also had a son, Maurice Tilling, who also played for Millwall. Nice to be able to mention these players. I actually was on a bit of a red herring trying to do some research, and I thought I might have found a player that Neil had missed, which I was obviously going to bring to his attention, wasn't I, listeners? But then actually he hadn't missed it at all. He'd included it, and it was me that was chasing a red herring with a misspelt surname. So there we are. Let that be a lesson to me. Knock me off my high horse, wasn't it? There we are. Millwall 4, Charlton 1 at the Valley. I've mentioned the Valley already. I think it's what always found it an interesting ground. I know it's easy to laugh at the rivalry with Charlton, but the history of Charlton is actually an interesting one. The Valley itself was created relatively. Was it recent? No, it's probably not long after the creation of the Den, actually. It was opened in 1919, so just a few years after us. And it was originally a chalk pit, a sand and chalk pit. And Charlton had played at a variety of locations around Woolwich and Charlton and Plumstead, searching for a new home. And eventually they settled on the Valley, which, as I've said, was a chalk pit. And their initial task, which they used volunteer labour for, was to actually flatten an area so that a football pitch could be laid on in this pit, basically. The terracing and, well, certainly there's no stands nor terracing for some time after the initial game, because that was just earth banks around the pitch. And I think it was a fairly rocky start, probably quite literally, judging by the creation of the ground for the club. They actually played away from the Valley just a couple of seasons before this particular fixture that we're talking about here. During 1923-24, they played in Catford, a place called the Mount Stadium, which is actually located in Mountsfield Park, for anyone who knows Catford. There's no trace of that stadium left nowadays, but it was where the park is in Catford, and that was the home ground of another club who we've mentioned already, Catford Southend, and they were going to merge with them at one point, but that all fell through. They would eventually return to the Valley, and it would become terraced. It was a vast ground. I remember going there as a kid in the 70s. Used to alternate going Millwall one week and to Charlton the other week, depending on who's at home. I'd always favour Millwall if I could, but there was no away travel back then. We didn't have the money for anything, and TV coverage was fairly minimal by modern standards. So if you wanted to see football of a Saturday afternoon, you tended to go to your local club and another one on another week. The nearest club to where we lived was Charlton, 161 bus ride away from us. So used to go fairly often to see Charlton. It was a vast ground. It was already in the stages of starting to crumble, because my dad always used to say it was much bigger in his time, and we're talking about probably the post-war period when it would hold 75,000. I think that was its record capacity. It was a vast ground anyway. I don't think you would have struggled to have got that number in there safely by modern standards. But I do remember in the early 70s, The Who played a famous concert there, which I think was listed as the loudest ever played. And there was a huge crowd in the stadium for that. It was almost predominantly terracing. For anyone that actually made it there, you'll know what I'm talking about. Vast East Terrace, and then there was a covered end, all open, so the covered end got its name, and just one rather odd-looking stand with like a four-arched roof, which gave it a slightly unusual feeling. Big ground, but always seemed to lack atmosphere as a consequence. And that hadn't long been opened when we played there in this particular game. So they would famously have to leave the Valley when it became deemed to be unsafe in the aftermath of the 1980s emphasis on safety post Hillsborough. And Charlton would play at Selhurst Park for a couple of seasons, and I think they finished up at West Ham at one point, before returning eventually in the early 1990s. There we are, that's the story of the Valley, which hadn't long been opened when we played this particular fixture, this 4-1 win, part of our eternal good record, obviously, over Charlton, which we all know about, which we never cease to remind them of. Elsewhere, I just thought, just for a bit of fun, before I leave you, listeners, I thought I'd have a look at and see what's going on in the Daily Mirror on this day, February the 15th, 1926. So I've got the front page of the Daily Mirror, which was big on photos, which is quite nice when you're doing a thing like this, because it gives you something you can look at and talk about. The Daily Mirror, Feb 15th, 1926. The largest daily picture newspaper, it says here. And we see on the front page some daring stunt flying, some American acrobats, aerial acrobats. This is the thing that used to get a lot of in the old movies, where a lot of girls did this, would kind of dance on the wings of biplanes as whilst they did stunt flights over. These pictures from Los Angeles. Miss Gladys Engel, one of the most venturesome, that's a good word, one of the most venturesome of American aerial acrobats, performing mid-air stunts near Los Angeles in California. Why does she do it? She does it for the thrill of it, which is my kind of girl. She's doing like a upside down, clinging onto the wires and struts of this aircraft. Very, very dangerous. Also pictured is a tennis duel to be played in Cannes, very exotic, Cannes in the south of France, between Miss Helen Wills and the famous French, I think she was Wimbledon champion, Mademoiselle Suzanne Lenglen. This was looks like a kind of a one-off game to decide who was who would prevail. Helen Wills versus Suzanne Lenglen. That's being played in Cannes in France, almost certainly for money in the most exotic location available. And finally, there's a picture of Countess Cathcart, who's been detained by the US immigration authorities in the aftermath of being named as a co-respondent in a divorce case. Very shocking, with the Earl of Craven, who's next to her there, pictured with a little clipped moustache. The co-respondent she's been named as the third party in a divorce case, but she's not got past the officials at Ellis Island in New York. They've detained her for some reason, almost certainly because she's a woman named in a divorce case, and therefore, the villainess of the piece. On the back page, looks like Ireland have pulled off a famous rugby win page. The Irish home forwards, dashing play. They say some good pictures, actually, some nice action shots of the rugby. I don't know if this is in Dublin or if this is in. It must be in Dublin, because it's the picture here. A bit of politics for you here, listeners. W. Wakefield, the English captain, is presenting members of his team to the Governor General of the Irish Free State, Mr. T. Healy, before the match in Dublin, in which Ireland beat England by 19-15. So this would be the precursor to the Republic of Ireland, which I think, from memory, was declared in the late 1930s, 37, 38, something like that. Anyway, and that's enough dipping my toe in the quagmire of Irish-English relations. Some good action shots there of the rugby union. And a win for the Irish. There we are. So there we have it, dear listeners. I hope you've enjoyed this little On This Day. Might try and do a few more of these as time goes along. I quite enjoy it. And until the next episode, until tomorrow, when we'll be doing a post-QPR post-mortem, until then, dear listeners, it's Arrivederci Millwall, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to AchtungMillwall. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a cheeky little review. Arrivederci Millwall. Till next time.
Who do you want to watch?